Well, I don't even have an opening statement, so you can go first.
All right, so I'll start, and I'll try not to fumble this time because I'm really bad at public speaking. So, my argument is that is based off of three main points. One, that anarcho-capitalism is not anarchy. Two, that anarcho-capitalism is unable to maintain recourse, and the non-aggression pact itself is a fallacious concept. And then three, anarcho-capitalism calls for the market to pay for the arbitrators to regulate actions for either accreditation or dispute resolution, which causes a problem by either the arbitrators not having the monopoly of force, creating a situation where the resolution is potentially ignored, or being paid by the private entities that they are responsible for regulating. So I'll go with my first one. Anarcho-capitalism is not anarchy. Capitalism, by design, is a system that promotes and requires the need of a hierarchical structure by giving the tools, ability, privileges to utilize their own means to hold production privately through a centralized entity. The anarcho-capitalist state is said to be organized by the rich and predominant capitalists rather than the majority working class. And what I mean by that is when going to a anarcho-capitalist state, most anarcho-capitalists, from what I've seen, say that organization is going to come from the wealthy, like 1% class, like the high-end people who own the majority of the means of production. Organizing it into a purely capitalist society. Anarcho-capitalism was created to interject an ideology that is diametrically opposed to anarchism and uses the surface level ideas of anarchism, such as abolishment of the state. Even the notion of being anti-state itself falls flat for the anarcho-capitalists due to the nature of the perceived evolution of private interests and how their coercive nature enacts levels of domination through labor subjugation, creating a pseudo-state of feudalism by having the leaders of corporations becoming what is effectively lords of the land. And what I mean by that is when we have company towns, you'll basically, the capitalist will create a company town or create a area where they can invite laborers, and which will inevitably turn into smaller pseudo societies. Anarchy seeks to destroy the holding of power by hierarchical structure and to abolish the centralization of decision making, which the anarcho-capitalist naturally disagrees with, although indirectly. And when I mean indirectly, the anarcho-capitalist does not perceive that the central decision making may not, although be by the state, but by the corporation entities themselves, which may or may not collectively convert or collectively, merge or have agreements with by themselves. Anarchy seeks to replace the systems with mutuality, liberalism through the distribution of power among the masses, socialization of the means of production, and the use of mutual aid. Anarcho-capitalism allows private entities to become monopolized, and thus the inherent structure of a corporation through the centralized decision making, and thus the inherent structure of a corporation through the centralized decision making, and allows the monopoly to fucking word. I'm just reading off the script. Basically, to intimidate engagements in a non-consensual conversation by withholding goods and services that may be produced in a given local municipality. Meaning that if I am Walmart and I am the only place where you can get groceries, there's no other place for get groceries because I'm Walmart and I bought every other place that can sell those groceries out. You either leave, which may not be necessarily be a feasible thing, or you give into my demands and you do as I say, because by threat of violence. And threat of violence doesn't necessarily or inherently mean that they're going to shoot you. That just means that they're just going to withhold resources, which you may need to survive. The anarcho-capitalist believes that that transactions, although untrue, are voluntary. But when holding certain goods and services like groceries or policing, the view changes into a darker perception. In modern day, the need for most housing comes from real estate companies via buying homes or renting. And although large cities may have the ability to allow for competition, in theory, we often see situations with telecommunication companies, shared agreements on territories, or through mergers to monopolize certain areas. This directly flies in the face of anarchism by one, a hierarchical structure by the means of the laboring class and the corporate hierarchical classes. Two, takes the means of production from the laborer by having monopolies undercut, acquire by hostile takeover, or outright bully lower level producers slash distributors out of power. Three, takes the decision making away from the labor class, though through closed negotiations of territory or by the means of monetary value of goods and that can be sold or purchased. Basically, I think I made a typo there. What I'm trying to suggest is that workers cannot effectively negotiate pricing because their bargaining power is being taken away when you have, like all the power sucked out of it when like these big monopolies control the majority of the market. And so when like they want to purchase something, like let's say a T-shirt, like let's say that company A bought out the T-shirts in like a specific market, and that's the only place that you can get a T-shirt in this area. So you say, I want to buy like 5 T-shirts, and I want to buy them for $30 a piece. Well, because they cornered the market, they're saying, well, we're going to charge it $100 a piece because we own the majority of the market, which is basically just a bad faith structure. And fourth, the anarcho-capitalist creates a pseudo-state from corporate entities that take away the bargaining power of labor, which is what I said earlier. My second point is anarcho-capitalism is unable to maintain a recourse. And what I mean by recourse is if I do something against you and you want to sue me, or have like policing action to mitigate any potential loss, or to protect you in any particular way. The anarcho-capitalist society is unable to maintain anything like that. Most of the time that they argue for independent policing, but if a company can outright buy them out from you under you, or if they own them, then it kind of becomes to a position where it's like, well, either you protect yourself or you die. And the non-aggression pact is itself fallacious. The anarcho-capitalist often says that the means of recourse will be done through private police force, insurance companies, and private court systems, and that most people will abide by the idea of the non-aggression pact. The issue with the non-aggression pact already is itself impossible. Regardless of private entities with the majority of wealth that could either buy out or draw out private owners, like the laborer, or entities that may be smaller, the means of conflict of interest may create the inability for these other private interests responsible for protection to withhold their actions. Say Walmart has created a township in order to have a laborer force to work under coerced contracts. By creating an area in which the laborer is invited to live, offering them payment of currency not standard by the means of the larger majority, and then traps the laborer through debt from provided housing, food, and other amenities. By what authority does the laborer have to look forward to when the need of recourse is presented? If private courts are to remain independent, then the need to pay those courts would be inevitable. Either the newly enslaved laborer would need the assistance of a benevolent private entity, or an outside private owner or another laborer on the outside would need to start the proceedings. Due to the lack of state and government, the laborer loses all bargaining power unless in a position of privilege provided by benevolence from private corporations, assuming payment is met by a standard currency agreed upon by the majority of production and distribution holders. Once a laborer is unable to leave an area or a company town, as such what we had in the 1920s, either due to cost of moving and the lack thereof from this unstandardized payment by which the currency may not transfer, or the potential isolation of the community created by the corporation, private insurance companies would have to also ensure that private courts acted without bias. But through historical and modern reality, we have seen through the medical industry, insurance companies will ensure that some level of care is provided, however, not at the risk of their own profits. It would be more likely that the insurance companies would attempt a compromise in which the laborer who was wronged would see a mitigated loss, but as assuming that the private court system itself is not biased towards any particular entity, or is being influenced directly or indirectly, and assuming that the larger corporation does not try to sway or draw out legal proceedings to effectively bankrupt any prosecution. A lot of the time, when we talk about when I've seen people argue anti anarcho-capitalist states, uh, entities or private owners that may be trying to sue one another may try to find another court system, because due to a state's centralization of a court system, if I don't agree with my local municipality, I can go to a higher municipality. And a lot of the time, anarcho-capitalism does not call for that. Anarcho-capitalism allows for other entities. Let's say that I can go, if I don't agree with this court decision, I can go with another. But if that other entity is out of my reach of purview for whatever particular reason, then I have to stay with this court system. And that's also assuming that the other one's not biased. I'm not saying biased towards race. I'm saying biased towards let's say that the biggest distributor and manufacturer has more sway over that town versus just a simple laborer or a small time producer. My third point, anarcho-capitalism calls for the market to pay for arbitrators to regulate actions from either accreditation or disruption or just dispute resolution. This causes a problem by either the arbitrators not having a monopoly of force, creating a situation where the resolution is particularly ignored, or by being paid by themselves, or are being paid by the private entities that they are responsible for regulating, making a situation where the need for proper regulation is not financially in the best interest of the arbiter. This creates fraud for investors, and if independent auditors are hired, how would the potential investor know if the auditor is under the payroll of said corporation? And if fraud is found, why would the corporation care? Without legal obligation, the corporations are no longer incentivized to act in good faith. If we look at how the pharmaceutical companies have acted with doctors prescribing opioids, we see a very similar situation. Deregulation has never worked and created bad faith situations time and time again by following for addictive substances being pushed by basically when deregulation occurs, you start seeing pharmaceutical companies start pushing out addictive substances that these pharmaceutical companies knew. They wrote doctors big checks. They incentivized hospitals to push these opioids, and when they specifically knew and misled low-funded government agencies through gained research to push these narcotics, creating a huge issue from the 1970s into the 1980s. Deregulation allows for weakened laws and government entities that are not well equipped to oversee misleading research, such as what happened with Elizabeth Holmes, that are unknowingly pushing products through the system. The lack of legal accountability will also allow for companies to manipulate, mislead, and pay distributors to push certain products and other goods by financial by incentives. Most of what I'm trying to talk about is let's say that there is a distributor that it is more wary about distributing products and selling products to a local municipality with some financial interests. Perhaps the corporation producing said non-standard marketed products such as knockoff medicine would be pushed through. It's something that's happened before, and with modern government, and it will definitely happen if there's no form of regulation. The lack of legal incentives and the total deregulation allows for private holders of production and distribution to corner markets and arbitrarily hike up prices of goods and services without recourse, such as what we see happen with deregulated pharmaceutical companies, and with such as when we saw Martin Shkreli hike up 500% of a life-saving of a medical drug. And that is my opening statement.
Okay. So I do not have an organized um, opening statement for this debate. So I'm kind of just gonna freestyle, but generally, when we look at anarcho-capitalism, I kind of see it as a legal theory more than an economics theory. Some people um, take the position for different reasons, but the history of anarchy is complicated in and of itself. Um, so it started out with a guy named Pierre Joseph Proudhon, who was the first person to coin the term anarchist. And directly, anarchist means without rulers. That's what anarchism means. And Proudhon was actually an mutual aid proponent. He hated Marx. He didn't like communism at all, but he also, a lot of these anarchist thinkers didn't like the idea of capitalism either. But throughout his life is when anarcho-communism started to gain traction within the Marxist community. Marx didn't like the anarcho-communists, but there were groups in America and especially in Europe that were starting to come up. Um, and this kind of grew Proudhon away from his initial ideas on property because he first in his main work, which is called What is Property, he kind of argues in a sense of not in a Marxian way, but more of just questioning what even is property in the first place and if it's even a valid concept. Um, but then later in his life, he actually kind of grew to realize the importance of a property ethic. And um, a lot of historical thinkers, and just reading from his biography and his later writings before he died, um, before the idealism of praxeology and the creation of it, I think he was very close to actually having a similar ethic as anarcho-capitalists. He was straying away from his mutual aid leanings. So my whole point in this is that after he died, um, anarchism as a general concept was taken over by the communists. This is what people now thought when they heard anarchism, and it's kind of saddening that nothing really happened until Rothbard came in, and there were anarchists in America that were not communists, like Benjamin Tucker, who actually I have his book right there. I haven't read it yet, but um, he didn't like capitalism either. But he did write on the distinctions between leftism and anarchism, which was kind of the start of the distinction between those two. And Rothbard just took it a bit further. So anarcho-capitalism is just Austrian economics mixed with uh, non-coercive law system. So this law system is based on resolving conflicts through a property ethic. So this is the only correct way, I should say, that you can resolve conflicts. So as an example, let's say that Crusoe and Friday are on a desert island and they both happen upon a stick. And Crusoe starts using that stick to kill fish to survive. But then Friday comes along and says, "No, I want to use this to pick berries." Um, so now we have a conflict between the stick. There's one stick, which is a scarce stick. There's only one of these sticks, and they're both fighting over it. Um, how do we determine who actually wins in this conflict? Um, so there's multiple answers to this, and one of them is the jungle ethic, which is basically might makes right. So through this ethic, you would say that the latecomer, which is Friday in the situation, if he's able to fight him or kill him, or basically take his stick and physically take it away from him and have him um, do nothing about it, then we have to say that he ought to have it under this ethic. Most people would find issue with this, which is obvious. Might makes right isn't a really good ethic. So then we have other idealizations of ethics. We have things like utilitarian ethic, determining if the decision is going to create the best or the most well-being or happiness in society through the measuring of utils. Um, this also creates a lot of issues because it sounds good on its face, but the real question is how do you actually measure utils? There's I don't want to get into the types of data and how we actually measure things, but generally, utils attempt to assert a ratio data, and it's kind of hard to do that if there's no 0 point in terms of um, someone's satisfaction. If you really think about it, I can measure inches, right, on a ruler, and there are 0 inches. And I can say 0 inches is also 0 meters or 0 miles or any other measure. So these are categorizations of ratio data, which means that I can measure things based on the ratio of other measures, generally. So with utils, you can't really do this because there's no 0 point we can really point at and say, okay, this person is at 0. They are not satisfied yet not it doesn't make sense pretty much. So the final ethic we get to is the anarcho-capitalist ethic, which is pretty much just an ethic based on a lot of things, based on the NAP, which Sasha mentioned, and self-ownership, and how we come about determining who actually wins in the situation of the stick. So we base it on a homesteading ethic, which means that whoever is the first comer of property or wins in this situation. So Crusoe had the stick first and was using it as a means towards an end first, and therefore he has the property right over it. So this is the most consistent ethic in terms of basing a law system off of it. And yeah, so I took a lot of notes on Sasha's initial opening statement. So the notion that anarcho-capitalism is not anarchy is a bit of an odd one. It's a weird hill to die on when it comes to critiquing it, in my opinion, because anarchy in and of itself doesn't negate, I guess we should say, hierarchies. It's not anti-hierarchy. It's it's how do I put this into words? It's anti un unethical rulers, I should say. Um, so when it comes to like how Proudhon idealized his worldview of anarchy, they or even some of the anarcho-communists never really saw um, anarchy as this anti-hierarchy, I guess. Some of them did, obviously, because they were leftists, but um, it was more so a rejection of the state because the state is inherently, as Rothbard puts it, a non-productive sector of the of society. So there's the productive sector, which is all of us, and there's the non-productive sector, which is the state. They are parasitic. They are the minority in society, yet they take and inherit our own wealth for themselves without producing anything. So this gives us the conclusion that of why, or more so the question of why they even have that position in the first place, which is pretty much why Rothbard combines both the ideas of Proudhon and Benjamin Tucker and all of these anarchists who were also leftists, but they did not know the science of praxeology, which is the study of human action, and the ideas of Austrian economics. So Rothbard basically took um, his economic leanings and combined it with his social and political leanings of anarchy. So there's also this notion that anarcho-capitalism is this like pseudo state which is feudalist, and Sasha brought up company towns. Um, so it is understandable to look at company towns in history and say that's an example of, I guess, the market. It's not really. A lot of company towns, and the reason that they were so bad was because, literally because of the state. With respect to union crushing, the reason that companies were able to do this was their connections with the US and their ability to get marshals within unions and spy on them and kill them. So this notion that company towns in history um, were bad because of the market is not true, due to state interference within these things. Um, and to the question of if company towns would arise under a society like this, possibly, but it wouldn't, again, companies don't have the backing of the state, and that's going to be the main course of my argumentation as this debate rolls out, is that um, that a lot of a company's misdoings and immoral actions can be traced to their ability to fall back on the government if they need to. We see all the expenditures that go through to lobbying. We see all of the patent laws that they're able to apply for and be able to um, enforce this monopoly on things that they produce, which wouldn't happen under my society. We see again, company towns being able to use the monopolized force in society to crush workers, which again wouldn't be able to happen in my society. So a lot of the critiques that you're going to hear of my system is can easily be traced back to how the state operates and how the state actually supports um, these nefarious people from being able to exert power over people. And then, oh yeah. So Sasha brought up the withholding of goods and services. He brought up the example of Walmart, how like if they would monopolize, buy every single other place, um, and they force you to either leave or you have to give in to Walmart. And I wrote Walmart is love, Walmart is life. So there's this interesting myth that goes around when it comes to this is a term called cartelet, uh, or just we can say cartels. So there's this myth where if we were in a true free market and there was no state, then and all of these companies, or in this example, there'd be one big company, and they all this big company just buys every single other company out. Well, this first of all, this is a weird presupposition that um, companies would just accept to this buying out when there's free competition within this market. Um, the big giants, such as Amazon or Google, they're able to be in their position because the government favors them when it comes to lobbying and tax breaks and patent laws. They're able to stay in their position because the government gives them breaks to do so, and there's no actual free competition. So when we do have free competition, um, this is going to be a very fierce game of who's winning. Um, so this, first of all, this notion that companies would just accept this buying out is um, not really true. Companies did get bought out, and it was just Walmart in this sector of the economy. Well, then I would call into question why other competition wouldn't arise. So, if there truly is one company and they start doing shit, I mean, Walmart has been under lots of controversies in their history when it comes to um, how they produce their goods, who they buy from, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to a society where competition is this free and this fierce, then when consumers start to have distaste for Walmart, this is easy, ample opportunity for other competition to come in and say, hey, this is our chance of going into a market and being able to convince people to come to our place and we make money. Um, so pretty much, uh, there's nothing stopping competition in this instance. So I would argue that there could somehow be this monopolization, um, which I won't even agree with in the first place. I don't think monopolies just come up out of thin air in a free market. I think monopolies are only state caused, but competition is so fierce in this society, and therefore um, there is nothing stopping people who have large amounts of money or even small amounts of money that make a company and compete with them. And then lastly, um, Um, okay, I'll just make this short. So I would just ask Sasha as my last question what the inherent problem is with the NAP. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Gotcha. There he is. Hello. Sasha. I think you broke him. Oh, he's rejoining. Let's see.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was talking, but I guess it wasn't going through. Yeah, I'm here. I'm ready to
All right.
proceed.
Go
Sure.
ahead.
So I guess I'll address that last question that you made. What's my inherent issue with the NAP? So I guess it's not necessarily I don't believe. I believe that's not possible. I think that like a non-aggression pact, especially when you're having to deal with like so are we there's a lot of schools of thought when it comes to anarcho-capitalism that I see. Are we of the agreement that like policing would be done through a private entity ran by insurance companies? Is that something that you would agree to?
Um, kind of. I mean, I see it as there being independent policing agencies and they would be contracted by like insurance companies. Yeah.
Okay, so my problem with the NAP, like, and I guess it kind of goes for um, most modern like state policing as well in the United States, is when you have like a police force that operates in like let's say the territory, right? So like um, ABC Protection Services is a police force that you can subscribe to or that are operating in this territory to ensure that proper recourse or like protection is given to uh, everybody. But when you have, let's say, a company that has decided to say, well, we want to maintain and like take control of property in the area, and they utilizing the like insurance companies to basically defraud both like the people in the area and any insurance companies that they may work with. They potentially could buy out any protection agency in theory if they had like to work against the interests of others. And like I guess a bigger problem is that if let's say you and 10 other dudes are in an area right? And you all agree to the non-aggression pact. But then, like, 3 of the 10 guys decide, you know what? We want to maintain control. So and then, like, you guys start perpetuating this like sightless like system of violence. What other recourse would there be in this system besides just inherent violence or just an alternative arbitrator that could easily be bought out? Because, like, again, there's no state, so there's no legal obligation for like private entities to like tell you if they're being used by larger corporations or people in higher privilege.
So that's, I don't know if you meant to ask it that way, but every single system, at least political system known to man currently, the only way you can I mean, like, how do I put this? So your issue is that there could be some bad actors within the system that don't agree with the ethic, right? That are violent, necessarily. Um, and I mean, our current system, for the most part, not fully, but for the most part, does the same way through their law system. And when it comes down to it, the way to the means to curtail violence is through defensive violence, self-defense violence. Uh, um, so I don't, I'm not understanding your inherent issue when it comes to like dealing with violence in society, because I feel like most societies do it in a similar way when it comes to their law system,
I guess I'll
including mine.
rephrase, because like the idea for a state is to have legal protections for its populace. So like I basically, like, Walmart or a large core entity can't basically say, well, we're going to buy the police force or we're going to buy out the police force and we're going to take your property from you. And if you try to resist, we're just going to, utilize the means of our, utilizing the means of the police force that we have now either acquiesced or influenced in some particular way to take what is yours. Like I see arguments regarding that with self defense, but I mean, how realistically would that go in the society, or is that even a possible thing?
Self-defense, of
Well, I mean,
course.
like,
Yeah,
I mean, in the sense of, like, let's say Walmart, like I said, is bought out the independent police force that, like, or the security service, and now they're taking your stuff. What is your legal, or not legal, but what is your recourse, if not a legal one?
what do you mean by taking my stuff? Like through force?
Yeah, like through like direct means.
So wait, what is the recourse? I mean, it's um self-defense. Just how if Walmart representatives came to my door right now and said, I'm taking all of your valuable assets or you die, then that's the same thing. The same thing would happen under both instances.
I mean, not necessarily, because like there are legal protections that have you. Like the police force can't necessarily be bought out because it's like,
Right.
well, if I wouldn't say might makes right, but I'd say, like, because I'm reading the chat, I'd say, like, if I have more resources than you in a system where legal action does not limit my potential, limit my or overreach, like, for lack of a better term, what recourse do you have if those entities with larger resources try to overreach into you or try to, like, take your property?
Um, I'm confused. So, are you saying like it's not inherently violent? Like it
I'm,
wouldn't
I'm
be it would be immoral for me, like, if they came to my door for me to shoot them, because this is not like response. This is not like a what's the word? What's the word? Like their force is not the same as my response to it, which is killing them. Like their force isn't as bad, is what I'm trying to say.
yeah. So, like, let's say that, like, so there was an issue with not long ago there was a magic card. The yeah, like if Walmart wants to use their $5 billion to silence you, what resources does the average citizen have to counteract this? That's a more eloquent way of putting that. I'm like I said, very
So
bad at speaking.
so no, you're good. So like not through violent force is what I'm getting
Uh,
from that.
yeah, sure. Like not it could be non-violent force.
Okay. Um, so I it's it is an interesting issue when it comes to how law would work, but generally the way I would see it is um I because I read a book on this that addressed this exact issue. Actually, I think it's that one. But so I see it as there's an objective law in society, which is an idealization of the NAP. And when it comes to America, we have this same thing where, like, when it comes to civil law, things aren't inherently outlined. It's more of a vague generalization of, um, like, who's a bad actor in this instance and who's a good actor. This is called a mixed law system, where mine's an absolute law system where there is a set ethic and we always follow that ethic. When it comes to our system, it's a mixed system because, um, I mean, the state commits crimes all the time and they aren't held accountable for it. So they have very inconsistent ethics when it comes to this. So in my society, I see it as there is this consistent ethic, which is um, not just the NAP. I would say it's more of conflict, more of a conflict avoiding ethic, where it's more so just we look at property and we see who is the latecomer and who is the newcomer. Um, and when this is based on a homesteading principle that derives from ownership. So whoever homesteads that piece of property, it's their property, right? It's theirs. Um, so with these like set ethics down, I would say that in the instance where there is a foreign entity trying to expropriate my property, which is the state currently, but like let's say it's Walmart in my society, then I would, if it's not violent force, I would attempt to take them to court. And there's different varying degrees of how arbitration would work, which I'm guessing you want to get into,
Yeah.
which we can get into.
Oh yeah, we can. Because like what the so I guess to establish a principle, I saw Storm's question, but I kind of want to move on from this topic and go into something a bit different. Let's take it. So earlier I stated that arbitration through accreditation or dispute resolution may not have the monopoly of force, or it may be paid by private entities. But basically, like, let's say that you take them to court through a private, like, to a private court system. For this instance, the private court system is not biased. But what's the larger corporation to say? Well, your arbiter, like, may have found some stuff, but we don't really care. We're gonna still maintain course because we have more resources to to either draw out this just this dispute of resolution either by bankrupting you, or they try to buy out um you know alternative, like they'll try to buy
So
out
like
this.
bribing.
Yeah, bribery effectively.
Yeah, sure. So,
1 second before you respond to that, do you want to bring Storms up here because he requested to speak?
yeah.
Okay.
I'll invite him.
Sorry, go ahead and finish your thought.
No, you're good. Um, so yeah, this is definitely a criticism I hear a lot, which is not like saying like it's a bad criticism. I mean, it's a pretty obvious one. Like what happens when or who's stopping, I guess, bribery. So, um, I would s- I would say before I get into the excerpt I pulled up on how arbitration would work, that bribery isn't um, is a fault of every single system. So when we look at our system currently, it is how do you say that? I can't say it.
Susceptible.
Susceptible, yeah. It's vulnerable to this as well. So I would not really see this as um, a criticism of my system, and rather a criticism of humans and how greed works in general when it comes to bribing someone that has power in a situation. It's natural
Wait,
for
really
bad
quick.
people to do that. So yeah.
I'm sorry, really quick. Is there like, do we have bribery like really commonplace in like our like justice system? I don't think this is like a thing that happens in America.
No, I never said it's common. I'm just saying that it's a fault of every single system. Bribery can happen and has happened, and it's the same in my system.
Yeah, but the point I think Sasha's making is that in a anarcho-capitalist society where like every actor is their own like business and they all have like their main motive be financial gain, that yours would be exceptionally susceptible to this issue, because if we have a court that's not like elected on, it's just a business that we all agree is like a good business at being a court. What's stopping Walmart from like paying these people like $10 billion to make this go away? Like, what do we appeal to if there's no like governing body to like say, hey, that's wrong, they can't do that, when it's literally just a business?
Do you think that civil law currently is not like the whole point of them going to court is through financial means? Like that's their whole incentive to go to court, is to prove their case when it comes to financial um like issues.
Yeah, but the ruling body, which is the court in this case, isn't driven by financial means. They don't care either way. They don't make money. Like if a court rules on a Walmart like case, they don't get like a certain amount of money if Walmart wins or whatever, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's a completely neutral body because they're purely governmental. There's no like financial bit to it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, I mean, companies a lot, even in our current society, do private arbitration. There are a lot of firms currently that like are solely for that purpose, is to privately arbitrate. It's for profit. So yeah, a lot of companies already do this in our society, and there's not like these mass bouts of
Yeah,
fraud
No. The
within these
court,
systems.
the court is the important part, because we're talking about, of course, companies are gonna look out for their interests. That's like the point we're making. But like, what if like you have a court now which is also looking out for its interest, and what if in this instance their best interest is just siding with Walmart because Walmart's going to pay them like a huge check?
Again, the private arbitration is for profit. Like it's basically a similar system that mine would fall under, which is arbitration that's done for profit.
Yeah, so but like the thing is, like these private court systems, like they get paid based around like taking your cases, and sometimes like if like Walmart has a substantial more like amount more money than you do, they could either bankrupt you through like drawing out litigation, which happens in our current system now because they can just but like the problem. They can technically do in our system now. I don't want to say that it's entirely feasible, but like more so in like an anarchist society, because like I I go to the judge or I go to the court system and I say, hey, I'll give you $10 million, and the $10 million is, we'll say, a private donation, but if you dismiss the charges against me or you rule in my favor, we'll see about more donations. And that's kind of the idea. We're a private, like, because that's more susceptible in a private entity versus like a legal court system where like most elected judges don't really care. I don't want to say that they don't care. Like there definitely could be, like things found, like corruption found in modern day society, but more or less in an anarcho-capitalist society, it seems more productive for companies to pay people off than actually going through a legal arbitration. I mean, like look at, for instance, the McDonald's versus like that McDonald's case with the lady that had coffee spilled on her lap, right? Like, so McDonald's couldn't pay the court system to, make the court case go away, but they spent millions of dollars trying to basically cover up and make it seem to like a frivolous lawsuit. So if in modern times, if McDonald's can do something like that and turn it into basically like a joke of a court case, when in reality it was like a very, very substantial problematic issue that did lead to some like change, like core corporate changes for Walmart, then how is something going to be handled like that in an anarchistic capitalist society?
Really quick, I think you're giving Bob like the easiest like example. Like the idea of lawsuits in his society is not going to be too marginally different outside of like if there's a law broken, right? But like a lawsuit is going to be like two parties come together and they say, okay, I want this amount reparations for whatever you did that I believe is wrong.
Well,
I'm curious, like we in this example, Walmart comes in and they just steal your shit. How does
yeah.
that work? Because we're not at that point. There's no like coming together and like two parties say, okay, you can give me back 50% of the stuff you stole. Like, I want my stuff back. What do I do if Walmart pays the court?
Okay. So, well, thankfully, an ANCAP directly addressed this in the book Chaos Theory by Robert P. Murphy, who's a PhD in economics, wrote specifically about this issue, which I was trying to remember what his refutation was before I pulled it up, because I read this like 2 to 3 years ago, but thankfully I found the right section. So, quote, to see this, suppose that it didn't. Suppose that a big firm bribed the arbitrators at Agency X so that lazy workers who were going to be fired anyway were falsely charged by the employers with embezzlement, while Agency X always ruled guilty. Agency X is the court, in this case, the private court. With this scheme, the big firm could bilk thousands of dollars from its bad employees before terminating them. And since the hapless employees had agreed beforehand to abide by the arbitration outcome, they could do nothing about it. But upon consideration, it's easy to see that such behavior would be outright foolish. Just because an arbitration agency ruled a certain way wouldn't make everyone agree with it, just as people complain outrageous court rulings by government judges currently. The press would pick up on the unfair rulings, and people would lose faith in the objectivity of Agency X's decision. Potential employees would think twice before working for the big firm, as long as it required in its work contracts that people submitted to suspect Agency X. Other firms would patronize different, more reputable arbitration agencies, and workers would flock to them. Soon enough, the corrupt big firm and arbitration agency X would suffer huge financial penalties for their behavior. Under market anarchy, all aspects of social intercourse would be regulated by voluntary contracts. So,
Wait, so what? But what happens to the people who already got their money taken through the previous rulings? To all these
What do you
people
mean?
who had like Walmart says, oh, you committed embezzlement, we want this amount of money, they're forced to pay it. You're saying, well, at least we'd see that we're not going to trust Walmart anymore. But like, what happens to those people who got everything taken from them, like the hundreds of people, thousands of people?
So, like, what would happen after this arbitration agency who was corrupt was already found guilty or not found guilty, but everyone knows that they're shit at doing what they're supposed to do? Like after that instance, or
yeah, like what?
During
When are these people made whole in this system that like got thousands taken from them in virtually a scam, right? What do they appeal to?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's definitely a certain issue that that's a little ultra specific, but I would idealize
well, no, this happens all the time. Wait, really quick. This happens like. I'm sorry, really quick. This happens like all the time. This is like the whole point of like what is that like oh my god, FTX. This is like why these issues are so difficult, is because these companies, they'll go and like station themselves in basically like sort of a similar system what you're talking about, where there's like very little regulation for businesses, and they'll just sweep all the money out of the rugs of their people and just run with it, just like totally hightail out of there with hundreds of millions of dollars, and there's no way to find them or to prosecute anybody because they're in a totally separate country that has no way to appeal to authority. That's like what I'm kind of saying. Like there's
Wait, what happens to the victims of fraud, like when it comes to FTX, for example? How are they be compensated?
well, they can't because they were doing business with a company that wasn't in the United States, like somewhere. I don't remember where FTX was located, but wasn't in like some crazy country.
Well,
Uh,
wait.
yeah,
Wait, do you
Antigua
see?
and Barbuda and in the Bahamas, so like places with very little like regulation.
Wait, so even in fraud cases that are domesticated here, how
No,
are
no, no, not
victims recompensated?
no, not here. That's the point. They're doing business outside of the United States.
No,
Like their holdings are
but
being held in a different country.
wait, do you understand? Do you understand the dichotomy I'm making here? You're asking me, how would victims be recompensated after this fraud is found out? I'm asking you, under our current system, how do we already do that?
Wait,
Well,
so
in the
like,
What do we
United
do?
States, if you're doing business with a company in the United States and they commit fraud, you can take them to court and you can get all of your money back plus a shit
Wait,
ton more for damages. But the problem was that
wait,
FTX was in
SBF,
a system.
he's being the his they're suing here. Like he's arrested here. He's getting charged here. This is even though his FTX was in a different country, he's being prosecuted here because um
I think it's because they were able, the U.S. through like their what's it called, what are they called, extradite.
yeah, extraditing.
Yeah, but like that's only because the country that had the FTX location was like willing to do that, because obviously you don't want to make bad buddies with the United States. But I'm saying, what if the country we're living in is Barbuda and this happens and there is no way to extradite, there is no other country, what would happen? This FTX guy has no, there's nothing you can do.
this is like I'm so confused. So you're asking victims of fraud, right? That
Yep.
gets their wealth taken away from this nefarious entity. You're
Yep.
asking how would they be recompensated? I mean, under our current system, I mean, assets that aren't necessarily there anymore, it's kind of a moral gray issue as to where how we would even recompensate them, or
Well, no, because in
especially in
America,
cases like FTX, where millions of dollars of assets were stolen from.
well, no, the point is that in America we have like a governing body, so like a court or a set of courts that can overlook a case, make a ruling, and then a governing body can compel a company to pay back with bonus, like whatever damages it is, back to the people. But in this system that we're proposing, which is anarchist, and there is no such thing as this like elected body of officials, like a governing body, if FTX already has hundreds of millions of dollars, what's stopping them from just forever paying out these places and saying, no, 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 don't listen to these. We're moving on from this. They're not getting their money back. Like there is no rule of law to stop
Um,
them.
so, I mean, when it comes to like something like FTX, especially these fraud cases where the assets that were stolen don't really exist anymore, they were um, used and don't necessarily exist because this is crypto. Um, then it's a moral gray issue. It's like how if the funds don't even exist anymore, how do we even recompensate victims of fraud? And I would say that when it comes to law in general, it's kind of hard to say like victims of crimes, like how do we compensate them for the not just financial, but like trauma or just anything in general that comes with being a victim of a crime. I would just say that under my system, I mean, if there were assets that still existed from this fraudster company, then I mean, hopefully, I mean, people would band together and say, hey, like our shit was stolen. We need to get it back from these violent people. But And
They
it's
do.
it's the same way with the state. I mean, the IRS comes and takes fraudsters' access from them. But yeah, it's just a moral gray issue, and this is more of just a general law question, not really a question
Wait,
towards my
wait.
system.
This isn't a difficult question at all in the United States system. You get taken to court, a judge will hear your case, and if they determine that you've committed fraud, you are not inclined, what's it called? You are literally forced as a business to liquidate all assets that you have in order to repay these debts. Like
What
this
happens if you
isn't like
don't?
a I'm pretty sure you just go to prison, and I'm sure there's other means of getting it. I mean, I can look that up really quick, but like this isn't the case in
Well,
America that like people just commit fraud and nobody gets paid back ever.
well, a lot of the time, like what
That's
they'll
not
do,
how that works.
yeah, like, a lot of the time, like if a company, like let's say that like you get sent to let's say there's no money involved, right? Like there's no money that they have that they can compensate if the amount is too it's greater than what they owe, than what they have. So a lot of the time they'll just liquidate assets, like they'll just sell your shit until like you can pay that the money back. So like because a lot of the time they assume that everything that you bought was through stolen means or bad faith. So like it's like, oh well, you have your really expensive Lamborghini. Well, we're gonna take that from you, sell it, and then use the funds from selling that to
Yeah,
give back to the people.
Again, what happens if you don't?
you go to prison, which can't happen in this
So
society
force,
that you're. Yeah, of course,
force, correct?
of
So
course.
again, all of these like how do I put this into words? Not rulings, but no, we could say rulings. All of these rulings, when it comes to especially financial crimes, are under a threat of force. That's obvious. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
of course.
you either liquid. Wait, what?
I know. I said yeah, of course.
Okay. It's either you liquidate your assets or we put you in a cell and we take those assets forcefully. So it would be the same way under my system. There would the people start realizing like, wait, Walmart is using this arbitration agency and it's using it against its workers. It's using it against people of fraud that are victims of violence or victims of illegal expropriation of property. There's something wrong about this. We need to put a stop to it. So other than obvious market forces by literally just not engaging with Walmart anymore and engaging with competitors, it's also a matter of, okay, these people are aggressive. They are using force. We need to defend ourselves. So it ultimately happens on force, just like in a state system where when it comes down to it, it's under a threat of force. So in my system, it's the same way. It's under a threat of force, self-defensive force.
Well, you keep talking about like you can like the people can rise up and say, "Oh, we're not going to do business with Walmart." What if Walmart doesn't even want to do business anymore? What if they scammed $100 million and the CEO says, "I'm just going to go retire"? What do the people do that? Like, do the people have to go like go to the person's house and like rip them to shreds, or like what is the means of action here? If you
Wait,
can't like stop going there to Walmart and not buy their product.
that's the same thing we do currently. We go to their house, we
What?
force them into a cell. Okay.
No. Force
So
them into a cell, but this is by a
wait,
governing body.
wait. What happens when someone is formally charged with a white collar crime of anything, of any financial crime? What happened?
They get arrested, and if they can't pay back what they've
Yes.
taken, well, usually
So,
they pay back and they go to jail. But
not
I don't
always.
understand the point you're
Um,
making.
the simple point is that when it comes down to it, it's force, and it's the same way in my system.
But the people
If
don't have
they
enough
are,
cumulative force.
what do you mean
Like
by that?
the people don't act as one all the time. Like the point of having a governing body is that you're essentially setting up a system in place that has already a set of mechanisms it can deploy against these set of behaviors. So it's like why we have a police force, why we have a judicial system, why we have like all these things. They're set in place where we can actually like sentence and have like prison set up where you can send somebody to prison. But like let's say like a bunch of people get together and we're like, okay, we don't like the Walmart CEO. We're gonna go get him and put him in like jail. Like, okay, where's the jail? Do we set up a jail? Do we hire people to run the jail? Like, you're just building out modern society with extra steps if this is what you want to go to. But if that's not what you want to go to, we just don't have infrastructure to do what you're saying. Like, I don't understand what an individual is going to do against the Walmart CEO. Especially, we haven't even gone to the point of like, what happens if the Walmart CEO guy wants to hire like a private militia with all the money he's stolen? What do you do then?
Yeah. So when it comes to, I'll address your first point on, I guess, infrastructure and, well, not infrastructure, but like, I guess our criminal system. I mean, I see it as the people in the society are already voluntarily engaging with the society's principles, and it's the reason that they're even within the society in the first place. So, when there is a bad actor, well, I should say bad actors,
Wait, how does that
groups of
address
people that
how does that address infrastructure? You said, how do we not have infrastructure? Well, everybody agrees to a set of principles. How does that address the infrastructure question?
I was
Like, what
gonna get
prison are
to
you
it after.
putting what prison are they getting put into?
So I'll just continue what I was saying because I am going to address your point, but you interrupted me. So, when it comes to groups of people who are bad actors in society, which we already do now, we already recognize people or companies are acting in bad faith, and we pressure our law system to do something about it. So when it comes to my society, where there's no centralized force when it comes to police, courts, military, and prisons, we it's obviously very theoretical because there's never been a society like this. But generally, I see it as these societies. I mean, these markets that are replacing the infrastructure, which in history has been done. We can see that there are law systems that are actually competing with each other. But I digress. Like there's a market for each of these things: prisons, police, um, military, and I'm forgetting one. I forgot, but and it's all culminated through insurance companies. So the way that Murphy actually sees this as is people who are insured pretty much um, are seen as, I don't want to say good people, but less risky people in society. So if you are insured, then companies see that as, okay, this insurance company that's well regarded, has millions of people that are under that insurance. They approved of them, so I approve of them pretty much. So these insurance companies would be working with these police forces, these courts, these militaries, these prisons,
But they're privately
to
ran, yes.
stop.
Like the prison
Are,
you're
are you are
saying is
you
privately ran. Well, because you keep going on, but I already
calm
know
down?
your answer. But the
Yes,
prison's
they're
privately run,
privately
yep.
ran.
So we're back at the court question. What happens when you pay off the prison? That's what I'm saying. It's a circular thing.
Wait, what
I
do you
could have
mean
just
by
answered.
pay off the prison?
Well, you're saying, okay, everything's ran by a set of market forces, et cetera, and they have insurance companies, and people put trust in these systems because these insurance companies vouch for them, whatever. But like in the same case as the court system, this court that we put up in the hypothetical before could have had a insurance agency that vouched for them too. But at the end of the day, they're getting a sweet deal by the Walmart CEO to not get tried and convicted. So same thing with the prison. What happens if all the people come together and they say, okay, we're going to put you in this prison? Walmart CEO says, I own that prison. I literally am the majority shareholder. I'm not going to that prison. Okay, well, what about this prison? Well, funny, I actually own that one as well. Like, you're going to run into a point where you don't have a governing body that can compel somebody outside of financial reasons. You have no response for it.
So this harks back to my previous point that I pointed out 20 minutes ago, that any society structure is vulnerable to, I can't say that word, vulnerable to this thing that you're projecting, and therefore it's not a critique of my system, it's a critique of all systems that have forces, well, not forces, but infrastructure in place that enacts law. It's bribery is always going to be an issue within these systems.
There's no shot. This doesn't happen in the United States. What are we talking about? It's like the most craziest
Bribery
assertion I've
doesn't
ever heard in my
happen
life.
in the United States.
What countries does this happen in that like has a normal system like the United States? Does this happen in the UK?
What do
Where
you
does this
mean by
happen?
normal system? I'm so confused.
Like the democratically elected system of governance that like the United States has? Like this doesn't happen. Why? This is like the craziest thing I've ever said. Oh, like all like systems are vulnerable to this, and like dude, I'm in your system. You can literally buy the prison, and like nobody can put you in it. You own the prison. You own the guards. You literally do the payroll. The same with the courts. This doesn't happen in our country.
So wait.
Very
Do
sorry, very
you-
sorry. Sorry, Bob. I wanted
Yeah.
to hop on the point of which like first world country accepts bribery. I would like to show you this article from Euronews. This is about the former Prime Minister of Scotland, named Nicola Sturgeon, who has recently, as June 12, 2023, was arrested for bribery.
Yep, actually, I have another
Okay.
example. In America, January
But he was
5th,
arrested.
2023, former judge arrested for bribery and obstruction of... Okay, wait, storms. Hold
Oh my god.
Hold on.
what is it, bro?
Wait, storms. Calm down, wait. So your argument was, where the fuck is this happening? We are giving you
Where
examples
are they?
of this happening.
No. How are they getting away with it? They're clearly not. They're being
Hey,
arrested for it.
Nicola Sturgeon got away with it while she was in office. She was arrested when she left office. This was
Okay,
after
wait.
she retired.
This is hilariously silly. Do you think my claim is that no crimes happen, or do you think my claim is that crimes do happen but they are punished for it? What do you think the
Storms,
claim
you
is?
said, you asked, this was your question. Where is this happening? That was your question.
Yeah, my
We are
question
giving you
is where does this
examples.
happen? The hypothetical we're talking about is where somebody's able to bribe somebody and literally bribe the entire system to the point where nobody can arrest them. That's what I'm talking about. Of course, you can still bribe somebody, but the point I'm trying to make is that in the system we have now, there's still a governing body that can punish you for
Okay.
this. That can't be bought out.
So this is called moving the goalposts. So I'm going to go back to what I originally argued. Wait. I'm going to go back to what I originally argued, and then I'm going to show you how you're moving the goalposts. So I originally argued that bribery as this hypothetical thing is vulnerable in every single system. You asked in response to that, where is this happening? So wait. Your argument could either be that this isn't happening in our current system, which is obviously not true, and now this is why you're attempting to move the goalposts, because we provided you examples, or that it's happening less in the system that it would in mine. That
No,
is a
that's not what I'm
completely
saying.
different argument.
Let me ask
If
you a
that's
really
not what you're
simple
saying,
question.
then you're moving the goalposts.
No,
If
let
that's
me
not
ask
what
you a
you're
really
saying,
simple
you're moving the
question.
goalposts.
Okay, this person bribed whatever this is in this case. He bribed somebody, right? In my system, what happens? They get arrested. I'm just asking you, in your system, if somebody is bribing this prison, right? If they're paying out this prison to not get put there, what are the means of actions that like the citizens have to basically shut this person down? Because in my system, you get arrested. What happens in yours?
So first, I just want to make sure that you're conceding on your earlier point, correct? That
Not at all,
obviously
but...
wait. So bribery doesn't happen in our current system. I just want to make that clear before we continue, because it's a different argument to say that it's not happening versus it's happening less than in my system. So
Neither of
I just want to
those
make clear
I
what the
said.
argument is. Then what
Neither
did you
of those I
say?
said.
I'm so confused.
Hey, can we stop talking about this? It's been going on for 15 minutes, and neither of you understand anything about law.
What? Dude, you're like a
Okay.
secret agent for him. He's so stuck. He's stun-locked.
Like, you
Can we
guys
just
move
move
on?
on?
Owen, can you like go back to the audience, because you're providing absolutely nothing. So can you just...
I
Oh.
have been waiting, and you guys have been going in circles about whether bribery exists or doesn't, and then
That's not at all
inaccurately
what I
describing.
Well,
Well, either way, whatever you're saying, neither of you understand how bribery charges work and how corporations are charged and convicted of bribery. So either way, since no one understands how that works, can we just move on to someone else talking about it?
yeah, I'm done. I'm done to move on.
I feel
Look.
like that's a good way to move on.
So,
Okay.
hold on.
I, for one, have a critique of anarcho-capitalism that I would love to present, but I will wait for everyone to be in agreement on that.
I don't know. We can't even engage with it though. We don't know what we're talking
You've been
about, so clearly it
engaging
doesn't
for
matter.
15
Hold on.
minutes
We have no
and
idea.
going in circles.
Guys. All right, hold on. So,
Hey, listen,
there's
if nobody's listen, if nobody's gonna actually provide something, and if y'all are just gonna sit here and devolve into petty back and forth, we can just end this now. But otherwise, please, somebody present something and talk about something, and let's get
We
back on
were.
track.
Bob and I
Okay,
were talking.
I don't care. I didn't ask. Just get
Okay,
back on track
right.
with something productive.
all right, so I think there's a little bit of miscommunication going on this aspect. So I'm just going to present my other alternative point, right? So what's the legal recourse for a company that hikes the price of like life-saving drugs by like say 500%, right? So like Martin Scarelli hiked the price of a life-saving medication. I forgot which one it was specifically, but to like an astronomically high degree. Where other countries like regulate, like say Canada, right, has like a hard cap on certain medications. The anarcho-capitalism seems to me where there is no real regulation, like of preventing like these entities from just hiking prices, especially if they corner a market. So if I own the rights, patents, and everything to say like chemo, and there's no other company that can produce chemo, well, what's the recourse that you may have if I say, well, rather than like $12, it's now $500 per dose?
I know this wasn't directed at me, but or was it directed at anyone?
It's not directed towards anyone. It's just like
Go ahead, Rush.
Okay. The simple answer is if you're the only person who can supply this product, there is like even at that extent where it's a monopoly, there is a point where the price is so high that no one will buy it.
It's such a non-answer. That's not what he's asking. He's asking if somebody needs this and they're going to die, and then they do die as a result of them price gouging, what is the legal action they can go about to like punish this company? That's the real question he's asking.
So my response to this is pretty easy because when Sasha prefaced it with patents and how the means to which companies currently corner people out of the market, I could tell he no disrespect, but it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of how this law works. So there would be no patents or IP law under anarcho-capitalism.
But if
there's
but
no
He's
means
not answering his
towards
question.
that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying like if I'm the only person that can produce this one item, it's not like like patents is more. It was just an exaggeration of like what I was originally saying. But
okay.
but if I'm the only person that can produce chemo, like and I decide and I'm like, well, because I'm the only person that can produce this, and I'm like, I'm just going to raise the price arbitrarily for no particular reason, and it's either you buy this or die. Like, what recourse do people have to either regulate or lower that price down? Like, because most companies have hard caps. Like most like states, like Canada, the government will tell companies you cannot arbitrarily raise prices to a certain degree, which is why a lot of people in the United States go to Canada to buy medications. So, what recourse do people have in your society other than having to go to another society to buy, the like or to obtain like these life saving drugs?
I would just argue it wouldn't happen because there's no means to actually
Oh my
corner
god!
anyone
What?
at it.
Dude, you're
There
not
would be no
answering his
means to actually.
question. Oh my god, bro.
Are we really gonna continue with this? So currently, I mean, I'm not saying that you just brought it up as an example of patents as a means for how people currently
It's just an example.
yeah. So I would say I would ask to that when it comes to chemo, how would this one company that's producing chemo prevent competitors from also producing chemo?
Well, let's say that like the ability to produce it, I have it requires like a specific like trying to think. It's
Sasha,
like a
can I-
manufacturing. Go ahead.
Yeah, like this is so easy. So let's say this company owns this one piece of land, and this piece of land is the only piece of land in the entire world that has, like, I don't know, name some random element like radium in it. And radium is the only way you can do chemotherapy, and they own this land, and they're the only people that can create chemotherapy. That would be the answer.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Why would sorry. Why would companies, if like they had an encirclement of ownership of property of this one resource that comes from this land, hypothetically, why would they jack up the prices? I don't understand.
Because like either you buy it or you die, and like you can either like
Exactly.
like
But
you can
then
either
what?
go ahead.
Wait, you buy it or you die? I thought this was just
It's
a
chemotherapy.
predatory pricing.
It's a I mean it is in a way predatory pricing.
Oh, okay. We're still on chemotherapy. So you're
Yeah,
saying that there's this random element that I guess is life saving when it comes to chemotherapy, and a
It's what is
company has
needed to
full
make.
rights over it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I would not really. Well, first of all, there's like nothing in the real world that actually pertains to this, but like if this chill out, if this were to exist, then I would say there would be no incentive to really hike up the prices.
Dude.
This is not how economics works, and in actual markets, in actual natural monopolies, which is what you guys are referring to, I'm assuming, this doesn't happen.
Dude, you have to bite this bullet. There's no way that you can like dance around this. This is like the most easy thing ever. How are you saying this doesn't happen?
You
This
can
is like
continue. You can continue with the postulating and just like
it's not
whining and
postulating. It's just
complaining, or
you're
you
just
can
not
like
answering his question.
actually address. I just answered the question. I just
No, you
said
didn't.
that
You're like,
in
"That
the
doesn't
real
happen,
wait,
lol."
wait, 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 wait. Yes, in the real world, with an actual natural monopolies, monopolies where they are the sole producer of a good, there isn't this hike up of prices. This is. Can you actually demonstrate that this
Because in
happens?
this hypothetical, what he's posing is that the resources that are monopolized are life-saving. Therefore, they don't need to think about whether or not the price is, because people are going to buy it regardless, because they're going to die if they don't have it. That's what he's saying, and you're not answering his question.
I'm saying that this dichotomy that is being presented would not happen. That is what I'm saying.
So like I mean so like the issue is that like in a real world example, like you have someone like Martin Shkreli that basically created like he bought the means to produce it, and so like it kind of goes hand in hand. Like if it's like a tech, it doesn't have to be like a natural resource. If I'm the only person that knows like a technique of how to produce something, or I'm the only person that knows how to produce something because I have the formula. Like look at Coca-Cola, because Coca-Cola has like a formula that they don't share with other people. A lot of companies don't have formulas that they don't share with other people, that could like you could either like make a knockoff product that may not be as good and detrimental, or you could you just naturally don't, you have to like compete with what they, or that word, you have to do what they say effectively. That's kind of like how Martin Shkreli kind of got away with it. But moving on.
We really shouldn't move on. This destroys his whole worldview. Like there's no way you can answer this in his system. Like it's all over at this point. It literally is. People in this society would be forced to just like never be able to have chemotherapy and people would drop dead.
Again, why pose? So my argument against this is that when it comes to real life natural monopolies, where not even barring any government control of intellectual property law, there can only be one producer of this thing. I'm saying that when it comes to this actually happening, an owner or a group of people getting ownership of this thing, predatory pricing doesn't occur. That's just not what happens when it.
What are price gouging laws?
Wait, what?
What are price gouging laws? If this doesn't happen,
law...
why do we have laws around it? Why do we even have laws regarding price gouging? Why would anybody price gouge if the people won't buy it?
I thought that we were talking about anarcho-capitalism, and like aren't there not laws?
Yeah, that's the point. That's what I'm saying, is there's no avenue to seek like any recourse if you're a person.
Yeah, then how are there patents under this?
Well, he's not talking about patents. He's talking about like a natural ownership of a resource that
Well-
nobody else can get because you are on the land.
We're not even
You
on the
can't
land.
actually provide an example of this,
I thought that
and
the
Oh my
resource
God,
was
you're-
chemo.
And-
Am I
Well,
following?
yeah,
The resource is
a natural-
radium, and he can make chemo.
a natural example of this would be like I own Coca-Cola and and I have the only means to like produce Coca-Cola. Like it's not it's such an extreme example because I feel like we're getting a little bit too hostile. But like there are companies that own the means of producing things that they don't share with other companies. That's why you have knockoff brands of like Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, and all these other and like Mountain Dew because they don't share formulas that create these products. And and a similar thing could happen with like life-saving drugs and medications. Like it could be a formula, it could be a technique, it could be you name it that they produce themselves that they don't share with others, and that's the idea. But
Couldn't have said it
like,
better myself. Legend.
but
Absolute legend.
so what I guess what I'm trying to like. So I guess moving on from this because it seems like we're kind of like reached a standpoint where it's like, well, either it's happening or it's not going to happen. So I think that we have a lot of real world examples that this does occur. Yeah, hold on one second. Because I keep getting fucking knocked on. I'll let you take over real quick.
Sorry, guys. No chemo.
One
Hey,
second, guys.
Bob, have you heard about Standard Oil before?
have I heard about Standard Oil? Yes.
Yeah, like the history of the company.
Not the full history, but I know
So-
I'm aware of what it was.
Okay. So when Standard Oil was monopolizing in the late 19th century, they had a pretty clear monopoly on crude oil production in the United States, but they wanted to gain a monopoly on kerosene production. So to gain that monopoly in kerosene production, they were making so much money from crude oil production that they dropped their prices to the bottom, absolute floor pricing of kerosene production to knock out all other competition of kerosene. Then what they did is they bought other kerosene makers, particularly ones that had failed as a result of them dropping their prices, and then expanded outward to get as much of the market share of kerosene production as possible. Then when they had such a large share of kerosene production and they also had quality kerosene production, they raised their prices up so that they could have as much of a profit as possible.
I'm back.
That's
Sorry.
how predatory pricing works.
So I'm reading from here. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you stopped talking. I apologize, but so you said kerosene, right? I'm
Mhm.
trying to find this. Okay, yeah. So tariffs are, I mean, obviously
I'm
another.
not talking about tariffs.
Art of-
I am not talking about tariffs.
I know, but
I-
this is relevant to how.
No, it is not. Tariffs have nothing
Yes,
to
it
do
is.
with this.
I'm about to wait. I'm about to explain to you, if you don't interrupt, how tariffs relate to this. So there was a consistent tariff on kerosene in the U.S. in 1865. The kerosene tariff was increased to 40 cents per gallon. In 1884, kerosene was placed on the free list, yet with a catch. If another country had a tariff on the goods of the U.S., and the kerosene tariff on that country was 40%. Tariffs restrict foreign competition, which is a vital section of the free market, obviously. The hindering a possibility of possibly more efficient foreign competitors shielded Standard Oil from pressure to lower its prices even further. Indeed, abroad, Standard Oil was forced to lower its prices to compete with Russian oil, yet the protective tariffs prevented the same from occurring in the U.S. So the reason that they held this power is, specifically when it came to kerosene, there's still more that I'm reading from here that talk about how Standard Oil was favored by the government. But this is again supports my main premise that the reason that companies in history, these huge companies in history, were able to, I guess, price gouge per se, was because they were protected by the government and from market forces that would inevitably cause them to. Not go out of business, but care about competition
stopped them?
and shield themselves from that.
But
Sorry,
I'm still not talking about foreign production. I'm specifically talking about domestic markets. I'm not talking about foreign kerosene producers. I'm only talking about American kerosene producers,
Okay,
which has
but
nothing to do with tariffs.
So the reason I brought up tariffs was because of the Russian oil example. So when Standard
but
Oil was
that's-
in when Standard Oil was in Russia, they had to compete with them. This was obviously not a free market competition, but it was competition nonetheless. But here, since there are tariffs, they were the same could not be said. This is what this author argues.
Okay, I'm not talking about foreign production. I'm only talking about production in the United States, which Standard Oil was able to crush all other competition.
He's saying the only reason like Standard Oil exists was because tariffs gave them an edge, which like doesn't make any sense.
Which
Like,
makes
logically doesn't
zero
follow.
sense.
Yeah, it logically does not follow.
Because again, Standard Oil did not begin in production of kerosene. It began in production of crude oil.
Exactly.
Kerosene, it wanted
Okay.
to expand. The company wanted to expand into kerosene production because it wanted to gain an edge in all forms of oil and power production. So it wanted to gain an edge in kerosene production. It already became a monopoly in oil production. And so it had so much
Okay.
power and money from crude oil production that it was able to drop all of its prices regarding kerosene production to eliminate competition, and then it bought out to increase its market share.
So
That's how it did
I mean,
it. And you're talking about
I-
government protection, which is fine because Standard Oil had plenty of power, economic power, to fund candidates for that. And it was plenty involved with all sorts of, intersections between government and economic power. Which is, if anything, is almost more of a criticism of anarcho-capitalism because then there's no government to even have any sort of protections on.
Exactly. Here, let
Which,
him respond.
which
So-
is my whole argument.
I'm really interested.
So, are you guys done? Okay. So, this is very simple. I know you guys are very good at argumentation, so that I don't know why this is like flying through by your guys' heads, but it's very simple. So, I am arguing from the perspective, or I'll keep this with Standard Oil because it makes it more simpler. So, when it comes to Standard Oil, the argument is that they were able to price gouge because they were monopolized in the market, right? So, monopolization in the market. Therefore, they are able to price gouge. I'm questioning this part. Why are they able to monopolize? And
Lack
my
of
argument
regulation.
is that wait. My argument is that the way that they are able to do this is through government intervention. Standard Oil had
Absolutely
patents.
incorrect.
They had
That's just insane. What?
Absolutely.
This is
And-
insane.
Okay,
I'll
hold
let
on.
you finish. I want to let you finish, but I'm going to respond
on.
exactly as to why that's incorrect.
I
Well,
don't know why
let-
this
let
is
him-
so
let him
bad
do it.
faith today. Maybe we shouldn't have invited Storms.
It's not
on,
bad faith
this is
because you're just
terrible.
completely
You literally just
historically
aren't making any
inaccurate.
sense. Yeah, you're not.
But
You're
No.
okay,
not
let
making any
me respond
connections.
directly to that.
Hey,
'Cause-
listen, hold on. No,
Yeah,
stop.
yeah,
If y'all
yeah,
are
we
just
need to-
no, stop. If y'all are just gonna sit here and start talking over each other, then we can once again. I'm just gonna say it again. We can end it. If somebody else is talking, please let them finish. Okay, I'm trying not to have a repeat of what I did last night. Okay, so
Crazy.
listen,
this is
y'all-
like this is actually kind of funny, but
So listen, y'all just chill out, go get a notepad, and like go write down the points you want to respond to, and like just wait until they're done, and then respond to them after they're done, and we'll be good. Okay.
The Ray teacher energy is really coming out right now.
anyways,
I was
anyways,
split children. You
So-
can't be that one.
so whoever was talking, I think it was Bob or whoever.
I'll let you
continued.
finish and then I'll respond.
okay. So maybe you guys like need to mute your mics so you don't accidentally talk. But I was gonna get my whiteboard to kind of draw this out for you guys, but I'm too lazy. So again, the dichotomy is this: that monopolization happens, right? And the reason that price gouging is able to happen is because of lack of competition. So the first way to do this is obviously to monopolize. You need to monopolize in order to competition. Well, it doesn't always have to be monopolization. You can look oligopolies where it's like maybe two people or cartels, but that's a whole different rabbit hole. So we'll just stick with one government or one entity, one company. So there's one company, right? One company, and there's little competitors down here, but they need to crush these guys in order to obviously monopolize. They crush them, and then this is when the price gouging starts because they need lack of competition in order to do this. I am not questioning this part. I mean, we can get into why price gouging laws even exist in the first place, which is going to be a government argument again. But it starts with here, the monopolization. This is inherently what I'm questioning. So when we talk about this, we need to talk about how monopolization even happens. So I want to make this clear right now. I'm going to say it again so both of you can understand this. We are talking about monopolization and how it's happening. I am attacking this premise. So the premise is that monopolization can and is causing, or lack of regulation is causing the monopolization. And I am attacking this premise. So here we go. I'm attacking this premise. I'll make it quick. I'm not going to monologue. So my argument is that Standard Oil had patents. Standard Oil had the support from tariffs to eliminate foreign competition from America in order to compete, or not compete, the lack of competition. Standard Oil got bailed out. I mean, it's all of these mechanisms that Standard Oil had at their disposal was fuck ton from the government. So my argument is that they were in this higher position of monopolization because of the government. So you can go ahead and address this now.
Okay,
you wanna go
first
first?
off, when did Standard Oil receive a bailout?
I cannot tell you the specific date.
Because
I
it
can find
didn't.
the article
Standard
for
Oil
you.
never received a bailout. Instead, actually, Standard Oil was broken up after the development of the first antitrust laws. Now, the reason that Standard Oil was able to become a monopoly was in 1880 when it began to sign agreements with other oil producers to buy them out, buy their market shares, and effectively take control over all oil production in the United States. It did that because it had the economic power, because it had built up its economy, because it had developed. And you're talking about tariffs. Tariffs are really irrelevant because tariffs, if anything, would help reduce its economic power. It would help actually increase competition. Instead, what Standard Oil was able to do over the course of its tenure was by buying out these refineries, these rivals, and then hiking up its products. And then after it had developed a monopoly on oil production, it expanded its markets into other products like kerosene, and then became a monopoly in kerosene, like I had already argued. And you're arguing that, well, it became a monopoly because of government intervention, which is completely historically inaccurate. It became a monopoly, as I had already said, by buying out rivals, and it was government intervention that actually broke up Standard Oil into separate refineries, into separate companies. And that was because of the introduction of the first antitrust laws, the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890. There was no enforcement or no real enforcement action against monopolization until Standard Oil and other robber baron companies like it. After antitrust laws began to take effect, that is how the government was able to step in and start to break apart these monopolies. We have price gouging laws to prevent monopolization. We have all of these enforcement actions to prevent businesses from taking over, becoming too big, and taking over complete control of their respective markets. The only way that you're going to have an effective system is with enforcement of policies. In an anarcho-capitalist state, if anything, is going to boil down into a feudalist state. Because in no way are you going to actually be able to argue to me that there is an equal footing between people, between workers and between corporate executives. There isn't. You can't argue consistently that they have the power to just not work for companies and go work for competitors. In an anarcho-capitalist state, you can own people. You can have slaves. You can use military and economic power to take control of land and develop whatever infrastructure you want and compel them by force to do whatever you want. If you want to have a good example of how an anarcho-capitalist state turned into into the state system that we have today, look at the last 3,000 years of human history. It began as an anarcho-capitalist state in effect, and then slowly became a feudalist state when different power groups took control and privatized military and business and control over their respective areas and warring. And after all of that time, you have the development of the nation state system that we have today. It's all going to boil down to the same thing. Standard Oil is just an example of how two big companies are bad for business because they can do whatever they want, take over control, and you need the government to step in to fix it. I honestly don't think you're arguing based off of the actual historical facts of Standard Oil or the historical facts of capitalism as an economic system.
Yeah, I don't even need to say anything. Owen's a legend. I concede my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank God. So that last part was kind of not really relevant to what we're talking about, but I can address that later if you would like. But I kind of want to stay on topic with the Standard Oil thing. So one question I had before I get into like my main premise is how do tariffs encourage competition?
Well, tariffs, I mean, again, I will answer this question as best as I can, but I still will reiterate the point that it is highly irrelevant to my actual argument and to the historical understandings of Standard Oil as a company. However, tariffs do help increase competition in a number of ways. Either they can help boost domestic products by decreasing the power that a foreign company can have in a foreign market. And as Ray just said, that's exactly what I just said. Yep. So I stand by my point.
Wait, what did you say? Wait, what Ray said?
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's Ray said what I said.
Oh, okay.
Tariffs can encourage
So
competition by
yeah,
protecting domestic products.
Yeah, so maybe this could be correct in different contexts. But when it comes to Standard Oil, this is a different story, and I'll explain why. So, well, when it comes to just the general understanding of competition in my system, there would be no distinction between foreign competitors and non-foreign competitors. It would be a true free market where anyone could compete in the system. So to me, you have to understand that in reference to my system and how I look at it, when it comes to tariffs, this is inherently a a hampering of competition, not because I don't see a distinction between domestic and foreign competition. It's all competition. So I'm seeing it as so there's foreign, there's non-foreign, and then there's just competition that they both align with. I'm saying that tariffs are still affecting competition as a whole. But I digress. So when it comes to Standard Oil specifically, the reason that tariffs were so impactful when it came to how oil was, I guess, ran in America specifically was obviously things like the misuse of public eminent domain powers that Standard Oil um, definitely did. I don't think there's any argument against that. I think we can all agree on that, which I, of course, don't advocate for. So we have that. We also have obviously the huge patents that Standard Oil had that prevented domestic competition from occurring. So when we have these things that are also affecting domestic competition, then it's tariffs are more impactful because since I mean there could be a prospect of domestic competition, but in this case, it's little to none because the government is stepping in and saying, here, we are going to give you these protections. We are going to allow you to use your power of eminent domain to drive out these competitors that could potentially compete with them, and we'll give you these patents, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason that I'm taking an issue with this tariffs thing is because it's affecting all competition. It's affecting all of the market. And when you have a company who's or basically a monopoly in the domestic sense, then it's like, okay, the government is allowing tariffs, it's allowing patent law, it's allowing these eminent domain powers. It's a culmination of things that is affecting all of competition. So my main argument is that Standard Oil did not get into its position because of free market powers. It's status powers. It's patent law. It's all these things I've already mentioned.
Okay.
And yeah, so.
Okay. I'm going to respond to that on 3 points. And Storms, if I miss anything, feel free to jump in at the end. One,
Sure.
patents have nothing to do with this. They have zero to do with this. Patents boil down to protecting intellectual property. They protect inventions, right? Patents boil down to protecting how someone has thought of doing something. With crude oil production and kerosene production, it has nothing to do with patents. It has everything to do with creating a company and having that company fall within the laws of whatever organization, whatever state, whatever country it's in. As long as it's following the laws that it's within and it's been incorporated properly, it has nothing to do with patents. And these companies that Standard Oil crushed were incorporated companies, and a lot of them, at one point or another, had an equal or a somewhat equal market share to them. but because of Standard Oil, not because of the government, but because Standard Oil's own practices by striking deals, by developing larger companies, by buying out shares, by decreasing their prices to knock out competition and then buying that competition, they were able to monopolize not because of government power, but because of their own economic power. And you're talking about tariffs, as Ray said in the chat, tariffs have nothing to do with this. They still have nothing to do with this. We're talking about a domestic market. Tariffs have nothing to do with intra-domestic economic relations and intra-domestic economic economic competition. Tariffs have nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with foreign versus domestic markets. So you keep bringing up this point, and it keeps having nothing to do with how Standard Oil became a large company. You can make that point if you're talking about Standard Oil versus other international companies, oil companies in China or Britain or something like that. If you want to talk about, for example, the Anglo-Iranian oil company, I think you'd have a better argument there regarding tariffs, but it has nothing to do with this. And it still, again, has no actual basis in the reality of the creation of Standard Oil. So I still don't understand where you're getting this from, because it has no grounding in reality. And you're talking about patents as if patents regulate all forms of economic production. They don't. They don't. Incorporated companies have a lot more to do with this than patent law does. And if anything, patent law would have a better argument when we're talking about medication before. But still, in an anarcho-capitalist system, you don't need patents. Patents don't exist. And you're right. You're dealing not with nations, but you're just dealing with one large world. But I think I can make a pretty fair argument in saying if I have enough economic power, I'm going to make my own nation. And I'm going to decide what laws I want to govern my own nation. And at that point, you know what I created? I'm an anarchist state. And then what the hell is an anarchist state? If you can just have separate monarchies and then you create, a feudalist system.
Exactly.
I have made this argument to you like 3 times already, but there is no fundamental possibility of an anarcho-capitalist state. It is just fundamentally impossible.
So we can go into that specifically, because I think we're not really going to get past the Standard Oil thing, because you're not really addressing my points. So
wait. Okay, I want to address your points before we move on, because I want to make sure that I'm addressing exactly what you don't think I'm addressing.
So, well, like, for example, your refutation of my patent argument was that your simple counter argument was just patents have nothing to do with this, which is obviously incorrect. So I don't.
How is it obviously
it's
incorrect?
not really, because patents protect competitors from coming into the market. That's blatantly obvious.
That's not correct. That first off, patents only last for 20 years. Okay? And patents have only one thing. It has to do with inventions. It has to do with intellectual property, if anything else. It has to do with the production of one way of doing something. One person can make a patent on oil production. Another person can make a slightly different patent on oil production. But if anything, patents, all they do is protect the business from having their intellectual property stolen by other businesses. Oil production has nothing to do with patents. If anything, the only part of oil production that would have to... I'm not arguing in favor of patents, and I'm barely a communist, but you are fundamentally misconstruing what patents are. Like, patents, if anything in oil production, patents would deal with the tools used for the oil production. They would deal with the rigs that they use for oil production, maybe the cans that they use to sell the oil in. It has nothing to do with the business creation of oil production. And if you're going to argue that Standard Oil became a large company because it had better tools of producing oil, or it had better cans to sell its oil in, that is a fundamental misrepresentation of the history of Standard Oil, which I have argued over and over again was not because of patents, but because of economic domination.
So again, when it comes to, I think I should maybe analogize this so it
No, I don't
makes
think you should.
full sense.
Because no, it doesn't. This is a point that we need to concede. Patents have nothing to do with this. They have nothing to do with this.
In fact, actually, Standard Oil made that exact same claim that Bob was saying. That I think they actually claimed to the Supreme Court that the reason they had a monopoly was because of superior innovation, not anything to do with their economic brutality. It's like
Which
literally
the
like
Supreme
word for
Court
word.
shut down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can find the case if we need to with the legal argument in it.
I
move on
don't see the relevance, but
from this aspect.
You
We're
don't
gonna
see
move
the
on.
relevance of the case that determined why they couldn't monopolize because they lied about it? I
Yeah,
don't
this-
understand how that's irrelevant.
I don't see the relevance in them Standard Oil making a specific claim about patents. I don't understand the relevance
That's
to
your
my
claim.
argument.
Because the
They
Supreme
have the
Court literally
same
ruled against it.
claim. They have the same claim that you do.
Wait. So if the Supreme Court shuts it down, then therefore I concede because the Supreme Court is always right in everything. Like
That is
what does that have to do with anything?
first off, that is
I-
a straw man. First off,
So
that's a straw man.
wait.
Second off,
Then
that
what's
is
the point
not.
here? What's the point?
The point is the same argument you're making is the argument that Standard Oil made themselves. And the Supreme Court said, you're fucking wrong, you're lying, here's how you're lying, and shut it down. And the
Yeah, if
reason
you want
that's
to go to the
relevant,
Supreme Court case, we can. I mean, this is like crazy that we have to
the
do that.
reason
Though.
I
that's
mean, I don't
relevant
want to, but
is because it's you're arguing historical inaccuracies to boost your points.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep
Okay.
going on historical inaccuracies, at least admit it.
Owen, what is the point in saying that Standard Oil uses as a rationale? I don't understand that. What is the point?
What's the point of what? I'm sorry?
Standard Oil using this as a rationale in their case.
Because they were the ones doing it. And you're trying to argue if what they were doing was proper, and you're trying to make a case as to how they were doing it. They've already argued all this, and it was wrong. And so you're just reiterating a dead point that's 130 years old.
Okay. Unless you can actually use the Supreme Court's counter arguments towards that point and actually elaborate on that and show how it is a valid counter argument, then there is no
Okay.
point in bringing it up.
Okay, here's my counter argument. The Supreme Court in that case, and I'm sure Storms could back me up with a direct quote, found that that was an incorrect argument. In fact, the way that they monopolized
Why?
was not through superior innovation. Instead, what it was through was economic domination by buying out competitors, dropping their prices to destroy competitors, then buying out their market shares, increasing and expanding across the domestic market, expanding internationally, which if you want to bring up back tariffs, then we can bring tariffs back up. But they found that that was incorrect. Because the innovation itself was not accurate. Because everybody had the same innovation. And Standard Oil all they did is just bought out everyone else's innovation and then used it for themselves.
Yeah. Here's
That
the
is the Supreme
direct.
Court argument.
Yeah. Here's the direct Supreme Court. Like this is. Apparently, this is from Cornell Law School. This is what they ruled. The court first ruled that Congress had the power to pass the Sherman Antitrust Act, blah, blah. We already established that. It then ruled that the restraint of trade include monopolistic behavior and only unduly restrained trade if it led to one of these three possible consequences: higher prices, reduced output, and reduced quality. Balancing antitrust protections with principles of freedom of contract, the court ruled that a company's potentially monopolistic actions could only be illegal if it led to one of these three consequences. In this case, however, the court found that Standard Oil of New Jersey's actions led to these consequences. So it had nothing to do with like, you have too many patents, therefore we're going to break you up. It was all about to do with those three things that they listed out, with higher prices, reduced output, and reduced quality. And you
this
can go
is just-
into each individual like points, but
This is also just one company. Like, we could get onto Carnegie Steel. We could get onto Vanderbilt trains. Like, we could go on and on about all sorts of economic monopolization and how they became monopolies. And every single time, it's not going to deal with patents. It's going to deal with economic domination.
So we're going to move on to this. Actually,
We'll move on after I just say this one point about them bringing up this source. So, them saying that, or the Supreme Court saying that their economic activity, was monopolistic, I completely agree with them. And the reason I do is because my argument stems from the positioning of their company in the first place, not the activities. So the positioning of their company, I am arguing, was caused, or not caused, but was helped by the reason that they were in this position in the first place was because of government intervention and them being able to crush competition because through already the measures I've repeated like 6 times already. So
Okay. Can I respond to that point before we move on?
wait.
Yeah,
Just
you're good.
let me finish the point. So my argument isn't against the activity that they did when they were in that position. My argument is that the reason that they were in that position is because of the things I've already outlined. So yeah.
Okay. Can I respond to that before we move on?
I'll allow one more response, but then we're definitely gonna have to move on after this.
I'm going to start off with a question.
Okay. All right.
Bob, do you know how Standard Oil was founded?
What do you mean how?
How it was founded? How the company that became Standard Oil was founded?
No, I don't.
Okay. It was founded by 5 people. I can read off right here who was founded by it. It began as an Ohio partnership by John D. Rockefeller, his brother William Rockefeller, Henry Flagler, Samuel Andrews, Stephen V. Harkness, and Oliver Burr Jennings. So it's actually 6 people. These 6 people put together what money that they had and developed Standard Oil. They didn't come. The company wasn't founded with a dozen patents and an economic outreach that covered the whole United States. It started effectively in an Ohio garage. The company was able to branch out because there were no antitrust laws when the company was founded. The founders of the company had a good amount of money that they could buy out local competition and then expand their network. They then expanded their network not through increased patents, but by buying out local competition and dropping prices when they could to improve their own market share. And then what they continued to do as they expanded was not improve their products drastically so that consumers were able to choose one or the other. They just dominated and prevented them from being any other competitor. And then they partnered in 1880 with another company to take control of 90% of America's pipelines. 90%. They didn't start with 10 patents and know what they were doing. They started in a garage effectively and expanded outward.
Okay, we can move on.
So, we'll do one last point. Earlier I made an argument saying that anarcho-capitalism is not anarchy. I think we covered that a little bit earlier. I'm not sure. Because I believe that we said like anarcho-capitalism is basically just feudalism. Is that a correct assessment?
It leads to feudalism, is what Owen was saying.
Yeah, so I mean, which I believe is pretty correct. So I also, I don't know if we addressed the points of saying that the means of like basically like the transactions in an anarcho-capitalist society is a non-consensual agreement because the goods or services are withheld by a company. So basically, like if I own like I said, a grocery store, that I can basically say like, well, you have to shop either here or we're going to ensure that you're basically without much of a choice. I don't know if we've argued this aspect or not because we kind of got lost in patents.
Are you saying that like well, first I want to kind of get into the feudalism point because I think that's a point that's a lot of leftist YouTubers like to use. So like what does feudalism mean to you guys?
So basically like individual like lords from like smaller municipalities, right? So for me, like when I say anarcho-capitalism leads to like, or not leads, but is effectively creating the ideals of feudalism. It's like, so I'm a CEO of a company and I bought so like I'll give you a better example. The main business model of McDonald's is not their stores, it's the land they put their stores on. And so because of that, they're more in the real estate business. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that what's stopping companies from participating in that model where it's like, well, we're going to own a bunch of land and then we're going to bring people in with promises of having jobs and wages. But then when they come here, it's like, well, now I'm in control of the area. Whether or not they're consented to that is irrelevant. Because the idea is that, well, they're here now. I'm the lord of this land, and now they're effectively serfs. That's kind of what I mean by feudalism.
Yeah, generally when we talk about feudalism, the reason why it's a reaction to something like anarcho-capitalism, which is shown like in history, is because anarcho-capitalism like just naturally flows into a few select individuals instead of being evenly distributed through like legislation and making sure that there's more like regulatory means as to which a company can expand. So basically what happens is you get like, this is like a more extreme example, but in an anarcho-capitalist society, there's literally nothing stopping maybe 10 people from getting like 95% of the wealth. And by then, these 10 people are looking at each other saying, listen, we don't want to lose any of our things. You know, we don't want to destroy each other. We're chill with how we are. We're all like exorbitantly, unbelievably wealthy. Let's just make our own little areas and leave each other alone. And nobody can do anything about it because we're not going to fuck with each other. And everybody who's living in our regions has to bow down to our rule because we, again, own 95% of the capital, and there's no regulatory means to disenfranchise us from that. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so first thing I want to point out is I'm going to address this point from a more ethical standpoint of what my system advocates for. So when it comes to like things like feudalism and borderline slavery, I guess the owning of people instead of the voluntary relationship between people, um, this this doesn't fall under my law system. So the idea of self-ownership means that people own themselves. So
Well, it doesn't.
people have owner.
Oh, sorry. I jumped the gun a little bit too much on there. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I mean, I'll just make this point
Yeah. Go.
quickly. So people own themselves, therefore you can't own people because they are in ownership of themselves. So like imagine it's like instead of owning myself, it's I own my car. And if someone steals it or takes control of it, and therefore they are the wrongdoer in that interaction. So it's the same way with my body and how I regulate it.
Bob, do
Okay.
you think that because you set up an ethical principle that therefore nothing can interfere with that, if that's your belief?
Nope, I didn't say that.
Well, you're saying that it's impossible that my society could conceive of slavery because my society disagrees with slavery inherently. It just doesn't make any sense.
Wait, Storms, I want you to like I wish we could have this recording on like playback. I want you to like quote where I ever said.
Well, I can just paraphrase. I'm not gonna be able to like compute everything you said, but you said
Please,
essentially
please.
you said essentially
So-
that you are going against Guardsman's claim of like, or just I guess our claim in general that it devolves into feudalism, which is essentially when people become slaves, because the entire idea of anarcho-capitalism is that you have self-ownership, and that by that self-ownership, if our society abides by that rule, we cannot then devolve into something like feudalism because it violates our core ethical principle. It's exactly what you said.
I am yes. So how does that track
Okay.
from my society would propagate that? Or
So here-
where did I argue that?
So here's the dilemma that I'm seeing, right? So like basically what you're saying is like, well, the core principles of anarcho-capitalism that I own myself. I am a public and private entity upon my own. And like I own my own means, like I own my own. Yeah, I own my body. Is basically what it comes down to. But what's stopping a company from basically saying like, well, even though you believe that's true, we're gonna say, well, screw that idea. We're gonna own you in anyway, and basically enforcing slavery. So I brought up company towns a while ago, and we talked about it quite briefly, saying that it wasn't a good solid metric or a good solid argument, which I disagree. I think it's actually a very very good solid argument because the idea is that if let's say that I'm not even a rich like a wealthy company. I'm a startup, let's say even, but I have backing of like rich entities. And I open up a company town for mining, and it's an isolated area because we're mining in a very very rural area, like a place where resources are not are plentiful, but perhaps like let's say middle of Virginia, where Rocky Mountains. So there's the only means to get there is a road, but when you get there and the promises that they've made are no longer valid, and they're effectively basically, or it gets to the point where it's effectively like, you either do what we say or we're not going to feed you, we're not going to do anything for you, you can basically leave. Or you can do what we tell you to do, abide by our rules and by what we say, and basically become an indentured slave. And you'll be treated with at least a little bit of respect and dignity.
The point is that slavery is not a choice. Everybody has the ethical principle that I don't want to be a slave, but you don't get that choice when you become a slave. Like, we didn't ask the Africans, like, hey, are you guys cool with being slaves? All right, come on board. Like, we took them because we had the power to do so, and there was nothing stopping us. That was the point.
So, this is gonna go back to like law and courts, because you guys are asking not about the ethic, but about how a thing like this would be prevented. So it would again just revolve back into what we discussed earlier. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about it again. If there's like a specific
well, you said it would
thing
never
I should
happen.
put down.
Well, in the previous one, we talked about that.
I never said that. Thankfully,
well, in the
I
previous
never said
one,
that, because I would
when you were
never
talking
make that
about
claim.
when you were talking about like prisons and courts and everything, you're like, well, this is like an unrealistic thing. This would never happen. We don't have to worry about this in my society. Like, that's basically what it boiled down to, and that's why we got stuck hard. CC'd on the point was that you weren't willing to accept that this is something that happens and this is historically accurate, which Owen demonstrated really well.
Wait. What did I say wouldn't happen? I want to make this clear.
I made the point to you that if somebody is being brought to a court to be charged for a crime of basically scamming hundreds of people, what's stopping the person or the CEO of the company or the company itself from paying off the courts? And you said, okay, well, what if the will of the people take them in? And I said, to where? What infrastructure? And you said, okay, a prison. I said, okay, and what are these prisons ran by? And you said, private companies. I said, okay, what if they buy out the prison? And then you said, well, that just doesn't make any sense, and that wouldn't happen because there's insurance companies that back them up. Like, it didn't make any sense.
I really don't want to devolve into semantics, so I'll end it here after I say this.
It's not semantics.
No,
why do you keep saying that?
No, wait,
Storms.
Storms. No, nowhere in that explanation did my assertion ever become that bribery would never happen. I never said that, because I actually specifically made the point that bribery is a fault of every system. So I would never actually make that point. So that's all I'm saying.
I actually don't think I can do anything. I genuinely don't understand how you're not understanding what I'm saying. It's actually incredible. Nobody is saying that bribery or crimes don't happen. It's that there's no means of governance to punish those who commit said crimes. That's what we're saying. And in your system, there is no ability to do that. There is no system of governance. That's what we're saying. And you keep making this claim that we're stuck on semantics, and that, like, I don't understand where you're getting this from.
Storms, you just said, oh my god, I don't want to get into this, but we have to. You just said that I said that bribery would never happen. That's what you just said.
You were saying that in your system that this isn't realistic, and then you pivoted to like, well, no, this would exist, but we have a way to deal with it. And I said, okay, well, how do you deal with it? And then you go back to, well, it's a system, it's a problem that everybody faces. And I said, okay, that's fine, but we deal with it. So how do you deal with it? And you say, well, we do this. And I say, well, okay, that can't be done because of this. And you say, well, they could do this. Like, you're bouncing around in a circular motion. I'm asking you plain and simple. If a company owns all the prisons and owns all of the courts, in the case of Standard Oil, right, which is like they didn't own those specific things, but they owned enough to be basically resistant to any outside forces, what is the way that you stop that from happening in an anarchist society? That's my question. I just want a simple answer to that. How do you stop that from happening?
So I really don't want to go back into this because I've already answered it, but are we good with going back into this, another conversation that we already had, or because I can answer this, but I don't want to detract from what Sasha was. So,
but it's essentially what Sasha's saying too. It's all the same. It all comes back to the core idea that there's no way, because you're saying, again, for this topic that Sasha and I are talking about with feudalism, you're saying, well, our core principle in our society is that everybody is self-governed, and like they would never make slaves because that's something we disagree with ethically. And we're saying that doesn't matter if somebody has the power to subvert what you believe in. That's what I'm talking about. It's all corely related.
So, Sasha, is this where is this the point that you wanted to go down? I mean, am I fine with addressing this, or did you want to go down a different line of questioning?
My point that I was trying to make earlier is it's relatively the same. So like it's basically like, well, what is the recourse? Like the original point was, what's the recourse of people who are going into these, like, if they're being tricked into going into a company town with a promise of a better life and and having what they need to effectively survive, then what then like they get tricked, like they're basically being lied to, and they're stuck in these company towns, and now they're unable to leave. What's their recourse? Like what is the legal proceedings to either, one, get out of that situation, or two, like, and if like you said, if they own you know every means of like getting out, like I think what let me actually just reread my point, because it basically sums up, it was my argument. So unable to bring recourse because the issue with the non-aggression pact itself is impossible, regardless of private entities, whether they were related to conflict.
I think you said it beautifully, though, Sasha. Like, I think you said that exactly what you mean. You're asking this question of, if these company towns exist and you're virtually a slave in these towns, what course of action do these people have? It's like I said, it's the reason why everybody's getting so frustrated is because every question you're going to ask about this society is going to boil down to what I was saying. And the problem we're having is Bob is unwilling to accept that this is either, one, a reality, or two, that there is no means to combat this, in which case we have to fundamentally be okay with this existing, with slavery existing in this society. That's just what this question is. It sucks that that's the only thing we can ask, but that's like the only question that matters.
Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to look at this when it comes to anarcho-capitalism.
Okay.
Anarcho-capitalist thinkers have talked about this immensely with when it comes to law and how bad actors are dealt in society. Because you have to realize this is a new idealization of political and social thinking. So a lot of this is theoretically built. You have,
which is why none of us believe in it. I'm sorry, but you're gonna ramble on the same thing of like, these people talk about this. It's a new idea. I need an answer, dude. Like,
Hey,
not
stop it.
Yeah,
Dude,
let's
you have to
Hey,
answer the question.
no, Storms. Please let him talk and finish. We don't need the interruptions. Just let him talk and finish. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I mean, I wish MF was here. So, yeah, this would have been way better. But, so again, I was just making that point, Storms, because I was just going on about how we can't look at real life examples of how this society could work when it comes to this issue. And we're looking at more of a theoretical side of, okay, how could, when it comes to law, because law is theoretical, John Rawls did this, Robert Nozick, which I have his book over there, does this. This is all a theoretical basing of how we determine how we deal with people. This is the fundamental problem of ethics. So when it comes to this, a lot of the main arguments when it comes to ANCAP thinkers, when it's things such as, like, what if there's a company town, and then, like, let's just say, like, these people, like, voluntarily signed the contract, and the contract didn't have any of these clauses about slavery and being forced into this situation, and it was just like, they signed these contracts, they go in, they live there, and then it's like, okay, now we own you, you can't leave. So in that situation, the anarcho-capitalist is first looking at, okay, wait, why would a company do this in the first place? We're looking at the reasons. So when we look at incentives, right, they're in anarcho-capital, or just human life in general, there's a disincentive when it comes to doing, not always, I'm not saying it's mutually exclusive, but I'm saying that when it comes to doing violent action or forceful action, there's a lot of disincentive that comes with that. So when you force a group of people to work for you, obviously their work is not going to be on par with someone who is voluntarily working. a company. So, like, I think almost everyone in here would agree with the fact that happy workers are, on average, better, more productive workers. That's why a lot of people who advocate for worker co-ops or full collectivization, this is one of their lines of reasonings. And I agree with this, that happy workers are better workers. So my first contention would be that if we are in this dilemma where there is a group of workers who are being trapped by this group, which is like the owner and his like police force and his ring of bad people who are enacting force and basically imprisoning them, they have no incentive to work good. That's the first point. They have no incentive to work good for them. And you can maybe say in response to this that, oh, the incentive is that they're keeping guns on them at all times and they have to work good, I guess. But even then, I would just say that this even gives greater cause to revolt. No one wants to be in this position. So this is why revolts, revolutions, et cetera, have happened in history, because there is a lower class of people who are forced by these top people to do things that they don't want to do. So in regards to how this would work, it would again fall back on defensive violence. If someone is being violent towards you, this harks back to the NAP, then your defensive violence is justified and not a bad action per se when it comes to ethics. So I guess I'll stop there. You guys can do with that what you will. But my main premise, I just want to make clear, is that defensive violence would happen.
Storms, can I take it for a second?
Yeah, I'm seriously checked out. This is insane. Go ahead.
So I just I'll start by responding to the two philosophers that you brought up. I think it's interesting that you mentioned Robert Nozick and John Rawls, who are both famously not anarcho-capitalists. Nozick was famously a libertarian capitalist, and John Rawls was famously neither. And I find your shocked expression really funny because that's a fact. Secondly, I don't think you understand how the institution of slavery works.
Yeah, dude. I mean,
And you somehow brought up the point and then tried to twist it in a way that made your point stronger. People enslaved others because they could do it. And it wasn't about if they were happy or not. It was about, I will kill you if you don't work for me. And I will keep you alive if you continue to work for me. And if you don't work for me, I will kill you. And if you try to revolt against me, I will kill you and everyone else who tries to revolt against me. Slave revolts worked so infrequently because the slaves had nothing to revolt with, and the slave owners, had everything to put down the revolts. The only really successful there were very few successful slave revolts in history. The most successful one was the Haitian slave revolt, which was only successful because the majority of the slave owners and their enforcement agencies weren't even on Haiti when the revolt happened. And the slave revolt was able to take over arms and was able to take over barracks. Was able to successfully go forward with the revolt. And then after the revolt, the country was put into a state of economic limbo by the rest of the slave-owning world. Either way, the point is, slavery is not an institution of consent. And to argue that it's an institution in which it's okay to have a gun pointed at you to force you to do the work, because I don't even know what the argument really was.
Well, he's not saying it's okay. He's saying just revolt, lol. That's literally what he's saying. He's saying it's insane.
Which is irrelevant because I'm sorry, but a handful of pickaxes and shovels and hammers are not going to beat guns and missiles and whatever other military power you have to put down a revolt. Which is why slave revolts were so infrequent and so ineffective throughout the thousands and thousands of years of the history of slavery. If anything, the most effective forms of slave revolt were really the lack of revolt, and instead were forms of intentional. I can't remember the word off the top of my head. It was just ways that slaves were able to get back, like working slower or destroying their tools to not work as often. Sorry?
Intentional defiance, I think, is what it is.
Something
But
like
then they
that.
just
I
kill
think
you.
Ray
They say,
probably
hey, you're
has
working too slow. I noticed you're doing this on purpose. I'm gonna rape your wife. That's literally what they'd say. Like, it's just literally like there's documents of this happening. It's
mhm.
crazy. Yeah.
And then if you try to run away, for example, they would first time they try to run you away, they'd hold you in a cold chamber overnight, or probably keep you over hot coals. Second time they'd chop off one of your feet, or they'd brand you and whip you. Third time you try to run away, they'd probably kill you. Or what they would do is they would sell you and your husband or your family separately
Yep.
to other plantations. And this is an institution that existed for thousands of years.
Yep. All right. What's the reply? The only reason I'm saying this, I seriously am just dumbfounded. Like, I can't believe that somebody is actually
I
arguing
think
this.
we should probably minimize like I think for all intents and purposes, like considering that he's doing a 3v1 and very loose 3v1, I think he's doing a pretty damn good job. So I commend you for your efforts. Do I
Yeah.
agree with your assessment? No, but I think that overall not going that bad. So
I just Owen, I just want to commend you for like being able to take arguments that I never made and be able to like just take it so okay, I'm just not even going to address this. So when it comes to why I mentioned Robert Nozick and John Rawls, if you Ray can when this is uploaded, you can go back to the recording. I never said that they were anarcho-capitalists, and I am very well aware that they're not anarcho-capitalists. If you actually go back to why I mentioned them because they have theoretical frameworks of how law works, which I both disagree with. I disagree with both of their law systems, and I am well aware of their law systems. But the reason I brought them up was to show that law systems can be built upon and designed with with theoretical purposes in mind. That's the only reason why I mentioned them. I did not mention them because they were anarcho-capitalist. But again, you just flipped on its head to make your point for some
That's
reason.
not what I
So
did.
Wait,
I'm
you're not
going
gonna respond to the
to.
slave question?
No, I am. That's why I'm still talking. So when it comes to, actually, I just have one question. I'm not even going to get into a whole monologue for Owen. So my question is, in this hypothetical that Sasha presented, where or let's just say like it's a Walmart company town, where these workers signed it thinking that they were going to be just in a regular voluntary relationship job, and now they're living in the confines of Walmart, and now they're forced to be there by gunpoint, and they are basically slaves and not getting paid, etc., etc. All the bad things that Sasha pointed out. So, what would happen if this event occurred in current American society?
Okay, can I respond to the first thing, and then I'll try to tackle that, and Sasha, you'll jump on after I'm done.
Wait, this is like a one sentence response though.
Okay,
Like,
first off,
no.
okay, one sec. First off, I said that Nozick and Rawls were not anarcho-capitalists because they famously completely disagreed with the notion of anarcho-capitalism, and they said that systems of justice would fundamentally not work with anarcho-capitalism. And I don't know why you're saying I flipped that, because I think that's a fair, direct response when you're mentioning philosophers and saying, this is why I'm mentioning it in a discussion of why you're supporting anarcho-capitalism, and those philosophers fundamentally disagreed with the notion of anarcho-capitalism. But again, like, I think we can just take a pragmatic approach. Talking about philosophers is kind of ridiculous when there's thousands and thousands of years of history as to why this is a function, an economic system that would not be able to function. And you bring up the point of what would happen if workers signed on to work for a company and then that company just basically took control of them and stopped paying them. What would that look like? And I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I don't know why it's relevant to try to say how
He's
would it
saying
look
what
in
would happen
America.
well, no, he's asking what would happen if slavery was in America today. We have a government and it's illegal. That's the only answer.
Yeah,
I
the
don't.
institution of slavery was abolished, which is how it became illegal. It didn't go away naturally. In fact, it was the Southern economy was completely dependent on the institution of slavery, and it crippled the Southern economy for decades after. Which, if you know about the Reconstruction period and how it failed, was because they couldn't successfully put together the Southern economy. And if you really want to take a look at it, a lot of those slaves in the Southern economy who couldn't move up north ended up becoming sharecroppers, in which they were given slivers of land and worked on that land and were given pretty unfair rates and effectively became slaves again. So I'm slavery can happen in an anarcho-capitalist state. In fact, slavery is almost incentivized in an anarcho-capitalist state. If you have the means of military and economic power, why not take people and force them to work for you? That's literally how thousands of years of human history went.
Yeah, I can't believe you asked what is the incentive for companies to have slavery. That's like I literally, like, my brain exploded when you said that. That's like,
The yeah. The only reason there isn't slavery anymore is because governments have abolished it.
exactly.
So I know I said in the text chat that the time didn't really matter. However, I do have some things I need to get done. So, uh, I'm just gonna say we're at 2 hours 26 minutes right now in terms of recording time. Um, I'll give you guys like 5 to 10 more minutes. Just try and get to a point where you can wrap it up and everything.
Just make a closing
You just
statement.
do like closing statements. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like I
I
would.
mean,
I think I
I'm
kind of want to wrap it up on that
okay.
aspect.
Okay. I mean,
I,
Bob, if you want to reply or anything, if Sasha wants to do that, I don't know. Just y'all
I,
just try to get to a point where you can wrap up. That's all.
I think we should just avoid replies for right now because we're kind of just devolving into a very like, you know, anyway. So I guess my closing statement is going to be, I think that we've had a very fruitful discussion. I think that given the circumstances that Bob here has done the best that he can, and I commend his effort. I think that ultimately it's kind of shown that anarcho-capitalism is just not a feasible option. I still think that there's no. I still don't. I disagree that it is an anarcho system, regardless of the fact, because of the innate hierarchy that it creates and the feudalism that like it inevitably employs. Um, the recourse aspect, there is no. Doesn't seem like there is a recourse for people who in an anarcho-capitalist society. And as much as like the system seems like it would be relatively nice and like and on paper looks like it makes perfect sense. I think when it comes down to like the non-aggression pact seems to be like a fallacious reason, like a reasoning or rationale. It falls flat on its face. I think that the recourse, there is no real recourse when it comes down to companies trying to like ultimately get what they want. Um, Overall, arbitrators are going to be heavily manipulated, or like basically bribed into allowing for companies to either price hike or price gouge or ultimately just allow for investors to be frauded by companies. And ultimately, like I believe that the fundamental aspects of anarchy is to more or less come together on a mutual and collectivized aspect like way where everyone works together to benefit. And it just from my opinions, definitely from this discussion, even though I do think that arguments for it are to be considered, that it does not seem like a system that I would willingly partake in. And that is my closing.
Bob, you want to go or you want me to go?
No, you're gonna go.
Oh, like ending statements. Like, that's what that was, right, Sasha?
Then I didn't know you were going to, but yeah, you can, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I would just basically say, Sasha, Owen, and I demonstrated pretty simply that it's fundamentally impossible for this society to exist. I think it's all good and well to argue for your position, but I think if something is silly, and I think if something's crazy, I think it's allowed for people to have a reaction to it. In the same way, I think pretty much everybody in here, if they heard somebody coming up here and arguing for a a white people, blonde hair, blue eyes, ethno state, we'd probably laugh at them. I think it's inherently the same thing here. I think if you look at every situation that this creates, it's insanity. You basically get slavery, you get feudalism, like what we talked about. Yeah, I appreciate the arguments. Hopefully we can do something again. Sorry if you got a little too heated, but it's just how it goes in the debate realm. But thank you. Yeah.
Okay. I think that statement actually, I just want to do this for everyone watching this in post in the YouTube video. That statement right there that Storms just made, actually sums up perfectly what I was going to get into, about how weird and frustrating this discussion was. So I first want to point out, I just want to give thanks to Sasha for being charitable and being very, as throughout this debate, was um, steering us towards the right direction and making sure we were on topic and giving some very valid points that I wish I could have gotten into more that weren't taken over by Storms and Owen. So I thank Sasha for that, for being and even our last debate was great. So so now getting into the rest of the argumentation, I think comparing my system to a white people ethno state is very telling of the preconceived notions that come with debating this, and just the very negative tones that came from this debate, and very uncharitable, very just bad faith. I really did not want to get into this in my closing statement, but it was so telling throughout this whole discussion that I couldn't not point it out. So I just want to say for people watching YouTube, in the future, when you're maybe doing this on stage or just in any VCs, a point of reference to make sure that you're not interrupting people. I think that's the main thing that's taken from this. Sasha does a great job of this, of making sure people get their points out before saying anything, because this provides for better discussion for everyone involved, and allows people to fully get their points out and not assume things before you actually let them talk. And I think another thing is to just be appreciative of your opponent and their position. I think Storm's at the end saying that he appreciates the arguments, verbatim quote, is also a sign of not really being charitable to not just the arguments but the person. I respect Sasha as a person and their position, which is why our past debate with communism and capitalism was so productive and fun to engage with, because we both respected each other on that regard, regardless of our position, and we were able to get down to the nitty-gritty quickly of our positions without appealing to biases or assuming things about people's characters without doing anything. So yeah, calling my position silly and comparing it to a white people ethno state again is just telling of these preconceived biases that don't contribute to any productive discussion within any realm. And I just hope that this debate serves as an example of what happens when people do this, and hopefully we can use this in the future as a reference for what not to do during a debate. So yeah.
Alrighty. Well, thank y'all for coming.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ray.
Yep. We're gonna end that here.